Hello and welcome to episode 37 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And as always, we're reading Anthony Kenny's A New History of Western Philosophy. And this time we're talking about philosophy of mind in the modern era of philosophy.
Yes.
Should we just get right into it? Do you have
Let's
any
go.
opening remarks? All right.
No, other than I read this a couple days ago, so I gotta get back up to speed.
So it's
I
been
might
a
be
couple days.
a little bit off my game.
Yes, because you're always on your game for these podcasts.
Well, there have been times where I had a cold. And there are times that I was angry or surly.
Yes,
I feel pretty good today.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. It's very good. Starting off with Bentham on intention and motive. So starting off here at this philosophy of mind, Bentham here puts a lot of emphasis on, when we're acting, where are our intentions? Where are our motives? What do we hope to get from this action?
Right.
And the first thing he sets up is these two kinds of intentionality. Directly intentional actions, in that the prospect of producing an effect was one of the causes for the person to act. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the outcome of whatever your action is going to be, that was your reason for that action.
Right.
Then there's obliquely intentional, which is the consequences were foreseen as likely, but not the determining factor.
Right.
So I know you're a lawyer, of course. How does
am.
this relate to criminal law here? Because I know this is basically kind of how it works, I think, in the legal system, right?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, when you're talking about morality and intentionality, so you usually in a legal setting you're talking about two different things. One is your intention or your state of mind, and then the other, your motive, is really just evidence to establish your state of mind. So there's different levels of conscious responsibility, I guess you'd say. One is an intentional act where you do it knowingly, where you're aware of what you're doing and of the direct consequences of it. And then the second one would be a voluntary, what's called like a voluntary manslaughter in terms. It's easiest to explain in murder. So there's
that's kind of thing. This is like a couple of degrees of murder.
Yeah,
here.
so murder first in Missouri law is you knowingly killed somebody.
Your direct intention, the consequences of you stabbing that person was to murder them. That was the end goal there.
Yeah, and it is after deliberation, which under Missouri law is defined as a period, considering the matter for a period of time, no matter how brief. And you always use it as a prosecutor. You always use the snap of the fingers every time you say it, because that really is the definition. No matter how brief, if you thought about it, you wanted to kill him, and you killed him, then that's murder in the first degree. It's not premeditation under Missouri law. It's deliberation, which is different. You didn't have to plan it, but you had to know you're doing it and intended to do it.
The end goal was the death of that person.
Correct. And now murder in the second degree is only slightly different in Missouri law, where you don't have the deliberation. You knew you were going to do it, and you did it, but you didn't really think about it so much. So something like, you're at a bar having a good time, and somebody punches you, and you pull out a gun, and you shoot him. Well, you intended to kill him, but you didn't really think about it too much. And then the next one would be voluntary manslaughter, which is a lower level, which is like basically you have a sudden passion defense, meaning you came home, you didn't intend to kill anybody. You came home and you found your wife in bed with another man. You killed them both, and there's a sudden passion. You would never have done it had this not been suddenly thrust upon you. And you had a lot of emotion or whatever, so it's a sudden passion. You don't have a legal justification, but it wasn't the same level as you deliberated on it or you just intended to do it. And then there's involuntary manslaughter, which is recklessly causing something where you're aware of a substantial risk that you could have caused a death, and a death resulted. So an example of that would be driving 110 miles per hour down a side street, running a stop sign, and you plow into somebody. You didn't really intend to kill anybody. You were just wanted to drive 110 miles per hour, but your conduct was so reckless, it was a conscious disregard of the substantial risk to other people. So it's similar. It's similar, but it's different.
So, I mean, murder in the first degree, that would be kind of that direct intentionality.
Correct.
You know, the end goal is to kill somebody.
Correct.
But second and third, that'd be more that oblique intentionality.
Yeah, I think second is really close to the first. It's just and the only difference is a matter of punishment.
Yeah.
In Missouri law, so it's really very similar. It's just, well, you thought about it a little bit longer, and so then you're looking at life in prison without parole or the death penalty, which is a whole different argument. But so sorry, I went down that a little bit long, but I think it's beneficial to have that as a framework when you're talking about these intentionalities or what you're intending to have as a consequence, and then it is a structural thing, and then you can think, okay, what's the moral difference between the different actions, and that is really helpful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because all of those acts are immoral, but I think they're all in a different degree, and I think the Missouri law is pretty well categorized.
Yeah,
you know that every drop down is a lesser punishment because you're less morally culpable. No, they wouldn't say that in the law, but that's really why they're doing it. They're less morally culpable for all those things. Depending on what you intend to do. If you intend to kill somebody, you thought about it and you killed them anyway, well, that's worse than if you're just driving down the road. I mean, you still kill somebody. And it doesn't matter under Missouri law for guilt or innocence how good or bad the person was.
Yeah.
I prosecute a lot of people who are really bad people. People that were murderers, convicted murderers, got out of prison and they got murdered. Well, they're still victims. Yeah. But you may or may not take that into account with regard to punishment. Yes. This is a whole different argument. All right, so that's a long-winded explanation.
Oh, that's interesting.
Helpful.
Yes. Yep. So then Bentham also kind of goes on to say that intentions are not good or bad in themselves. They really do have to be...
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, according to Bentham, they kind of have to be attached to the action to actually have any impact on anything. Otherwise, if you just want to do something but you never do it, is that really wrong at all? Yeah. Yeah, you would say so?
Yeah, don't you think so? If you're just like, it's almost like having a voodoo doll. I hate that person. I want that person to die. I think that's not a good thought.
Well, I think that's not a good thing. But I definitely think it's not as bad as, of course, actually doing the action.
True.
But it's just not a good thing that you should be doing. Yes.
Yes, but we're talking about morality and ethics, and so I don't think you can say it doesn't matter if you don't do it. It's kind of like as Jimmy Carter said, he committed the sin of lusting after other women, which was funny coming from him. But
I've never heard that.
You never heard that reference? Yeah. Not that I don't think he did it often, but he was, I think there was some religious talk, and he it was on the point of we're all sinners, that type of thing, and he has lusted in his heart after another woman before, which is a tremendous revelation generally, but for a guy like him, it was just like, what the hell is he talking about?
And then Bentham also kind of goes on to talk about, the circumstances surrounding your actions, how aware you are, when you're going to do an action of, what's actually going to happen.
Right.
And he puts these into two different categories. There's an advised act in which one is, aware of their circumstances, aware of what's going to happen. And then there's an unadvised act where you're not entirely sure, if your actions are actually going to have consequences, that sort of thing, not exactly sure what's going to be the outcome here. Right.
Which is it's kind of like the difference between really being an intentional act or just being a reckless act, I think. I mean, I think there's but if you're, I don't know what he would think of, like whether impossibility is a defense. I'd be interested in what he would think about that. Let's say if you have a gun and you think it has real bullets in it, and you shoot it, because you want to kill that person, but it had blanks or it misfires. Morally speaking, what would his view be on the relative morality of that act?
I don't know.
Because the consequence was nothing. It was just a loud noise. With one, the other one, he killed somebody.
Yeah.
Is there really a moral difference between the two acts?
Well, he would say no, of course, because, he thinks the intentions aren't good or bad in themselves. They have to be attached to that action. I would say that there is a difference there.
Really? Morally, there's a difference?
Well, I would say that if you fully intend to shoot someone, but then are just surprised when your gun doesn't work, I think that's... Or is there a difference between actually shooting someone and just shooting a blank, like on accident? Or wait, what was the...
The scenario is...
Yes.
I'm going to kill our neighbor, Matt. I'm fed up with him. So I go over there and I point my gun at him and I shoot him.
Yes.
In one scenario, I check and make sure the gun's loaded and I shoot him in the face and I kill him. The other scenario is same exact scenario, but somebody unknown to me replaced my bullets with blanks. So I check to see it's loaded. I know it's loaded. I go over there and I shoot him, but it's just a blank.
Yes.
Is there a difference in morality or ethics?
I would say morally, no. I think those are both just as wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you didn't know that it was going to happen doesn't make it any different that you wanted to shoot him in the face. But I think like punishment-wise, I don't think you can punish somebody as severely.
That's a different subject.
Yes.
But I mean, the question is whether whether the fact that it's impossible is a defense, morally or legally. It was impossible for me to kill him by shooting him with a blank.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any difference morally.
That's true.
I think you're right, though. There is a different consequence.
Because
and so the punishment may be different because you were lucky in a sense as the murderer. The gun didn't go off because then you're not even guilty of a murder.
Yes.
You're guilty of an attempted murder.
Exactly.
You're going to get a lot of years for that attempted murder because you went pretty far. You tried your best.
And then Bentham also goes on to say that your intentions can be good and your motives bad. And so this is where he kind of uses this analogy. Say you have a political opponent or something, and they've committed a crime. And so your intentions are to persecute them and put them in jail for that crime. That's your intention. But your motives are really just to have them removed as your political opponent. So your intentions are good there, but your motives are bad because otherwise, if they weren't your political opponent, chances are you wouldn't have tried to put them in jail.
Oh, I don't think that's what he's saying.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure.
Well, neither am I.
But I think you're right in the first part you said, but I think you basically you have two motives. Or maybe you have one motive, and your motive is I don't like that guy, I want to get him, but your job is to prosecute people who are guilty, and so you're prosecuting him because you really think he's guilty.
Yes.
And for me, I view it more as a dual motive. You have one motive is to do your job, is to prosecute the person for whatever crime, but then your other motive is, well, it's good for me that they're out of the way or whatever.
Yeah.
And those are dangerous situations to be in morally, and that's why you recuse yourself and you let somebody else do it.
Yes.
Because otherwise,
because a big conflict of interests there.
Right, and then the question is. There's a big moral question of whether or not you would have done it. If your answer is I wouldn't have done it except for my motive to knock this other rival out of the way, well, I think that I don't know. I think Bentham would say that would be wrong, but he's trying to make the distinction of even if you have bad motive, you could still do the right thing.
Yes.
And that's an interesting discussion of more of a practical outcome as opposed to, in my view, a moral decision.
I think we get into that a little bit more in the next chapter. So stay tuned, listeners, for next week.
Yeah, because I'm talking more about ethics than I am about mine. But
that's true.
But there's a lot of overlap.
Yes. Moving on to reason, understanding, and will with Schopenhauer. Unless you had anything else to add about Bentham.
Nah. Oh, I did. Let me see. I had something over here. Yeah, well, I think let's see. I'm trying to.
Yes.
It was talking about utilitarianism, and that they had affirmed that the motive has nothing to do with the morality of the action, and I find that repugnant.
Yeah.
I think motive has everything to do with the morality of the action.
Well, that's with the utilitarianism, kind of just to touch on that a little bit. That's, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So, if the consequences are, still good, the outcome is still good there. It doesn't really matter what your motive is. And
that's what Bentham thinks.
Yes.
Right. And I disagree with that.
Yes, so do I.
Yes.
Moving on to Schopenhauer.
Well, why do you disagree with that? You didn't say why you disagree with that.
Well, I mean, we kind of talked about this already. It's just as bad, if you intend to do something, but it doesn't actually end up happening by some chance or anything, that's still a morally incorrect action, You were still in that frame of mind where you desired the death of somebody or you desired this awful thing, and even if it didn't happen, you still were, in the process or wanting to do that thing, and even if it doesn't happen, that's still wrong.
All right. Okay. Reason, understanding, and will.
Yes. Schopenhauer. So Schopenhauer... Yeah, that was really loud. All right, so Schopenhauer believed that animals possess understanding and humans have reason. So, we all have in common with animals that we can, understand things around us, perceive these things, but reason takes it a step farther.
I like how he says this. I don't know if you're going to say this, but that animals live in the present alone. Man lives at the same time in the future and the present. I think that's true. Don't you think that's a good way to make the distinction, the intellectual or the discussion of the mind of an animal as opposed to the mind of a human?
I agree.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying.
I didn't know if you had anything else to add.
No, I think that's true.
You should just say yes.
Oh, yeah. That's your thing. Schopenhauer really found this evident in language. So I'm going to read this little section here. He says, only by the aid of language does reason bring about its most important achievements, namely the harmonious and consistent action of several individuals, the planned cooperation of many thousands, civilization, the state, and then science, the storing up of previous experience, the summarizing into one concept of what is common, the communication of truth, the spreading of error, thoughts and poems, dogmas, and superstitions. So he's saying, well, reason's all well and good, but, even if we just have reason, we can't go anywhere without language. Language is that really vital thing to everything we do, essentially.
Yes, especially the written or recorded language, so that you can communicate over generations and build on that knowledge. Yes. It was funny. I was listening to a speech by Tucker Carlson. We won't go too far into this, but he gave a speech recently in Hungary.
Really?
He had interviewed Viktor Orban, who was the president of Hungary. But anyway, he gave a speech, and part of the speech, you're going to have to listen to it later, he talks about language and the use of language by totalitarian wannabes. And we've talked about this in the past. And you bringing up language about knowledge in the mind. He was espousing the belief, which I think we've talked about, is that if you can control the language, you can control how people think about things, and certainly control about how they can communicate about different political ideas and different intellectual ideas. And I think it's a similar point. What Schopenhauer is saying is that language is intrinsic on your ability to think and have an independent mind.
If you control language, you basically control everything.
Right.
That's the underlying thing.
So Tucker Carlson believes you, agrees with you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was just...
You don't have to mock me.
I wasn't mocking you. I did not mean to mock you.
It's just kind of funny that our discussions, you don't hear people talk about language that often.
That's true.
But
they should talk about it more. Schopenhauer then goes on to say that reason is not enough for virtue. We can't get to this, ethical state just by reason. And so he was very in favor of meditation, in that you can find the ideas, kind of going back to the Platonic ideas, which I know is your favorite thing in the world.
I guess it's not the worst. Utilitarianism is the worst. The worst.
The worst. All right. Well, keep that in mind for next episode. We can talk about some more.
Destructive philosophy ever. But go ahead.
And so then he goes on to define a genius. And he believes that a genius is someone who has a more intense knowledge of ideas, who's very imaginative and restless and borders on madness and is very artistic. Because he really believed that, the very smart person isn't so much, mathematical, not exactly, structured in that sort of way, but more artistic, creative, that sort of thing. More on the creation side rather than the actual math and science side. That's what a true genius is, because they like to meditate and dwell in madness.
Well, if you're thinking about the mind, well, as they say, there's a thin line between genius and insanity and all that. But if you contemplate your mind too much, I think you almost go mad.
Yes. And so Schopenhauer, of course, was very big on the power of the will, and that was what really drives humanity and everything, essentially. And so with that, he kind of says we shouldn't really be too afraid of death, because after death, the will just joins into the single universal will. Our individual will goes somewhere else to join all the others to become one big will, which means
you lose all individuality. And I don't, and we talk about it in the next chapter too, but boy, it's really depressing to me, and it doesn't really answer effectively what's the point. If all you come in from this, you kind of, I guess you get temporarily separated from the will, which is everybody, the being, all being, and that will has free will, and we just kind of operate within this system. But we're determined. We have a certain amount of determinism involved until we die, and then we just lose our our individuality into this greater being, and we are really
essentially
nothingness.
essentially an 80-year break in this time span of being the will to
Right.
be your own person. I just think that's, well, why?
It reminds me, and it's like, and then he talks about, you know, the will moving along, like the will progresses as this entity, this super entity. It reminds me of the Borg from Star Trek. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Like, I don't know
you've
if you're
talked about
familiar
this
with it.
before.
Where there's this community, and they lose all individuality. They're all connected, but they're advancing, and like this giant machine, but they're beings. I mean, they're physical beings that were like semi-computerized, and it's very similar to that kind of philosophy. It's like, what's the point?
It's just like advancement for the point of advancement. Like, there's
Right.
no greater goal there. And it's
Right.
strange to see him kind of contrast that with his idea of the genius, who's very
Right.
creative and artistic and
Right.
imaginative. And it's like,
Right.
well, then you just lose all that.
Right.
Very
yeah,
strange.
then it's gone.
Mhm.
You know, and what's the point? I don't understand the draw to that.
Yes.
I think it makes a certain amount of logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
I get it, because I guess you can't refute it.
Yeah.
But then it's just like, gosh, I don't even want
Yeah,
to
I
bother.
don't want to. I
Yeah.
want to believe in that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
what's the point? But it's interesting.
So then we move on to experimental versus philosophical psychology.
Yeah.
So here, this is the end of the 19th century, essentially. So we're really getting the rise of psychology as an actual science. And with that, we see William James, who's very much the father of psychology.
Right.
And he believed that emotions are no more than perceptions of bodily processes. And so with this, he kind of says,
If you got gas, you feel bad.
yeah.
All right.
Not exactly.
No? Oh, okay.
Because he kind of says, we don't cry because we're sad. We're sad because we cry.
Yeah.
The bodily process relates to the emotion. The emotion doesn't lead to the bodily process, which is...
I just rolled my eyes,
Yes,
which is a bodily process of me.
Did that make you...
mocking
Yeah.
his? I don't know. I mean, I go back to my theory that all psychiatrists are crazy.
Yes. He's very interesting. He also goes on to say that all states of consciousness can be called feelings, and consciousness is essentially a single momentary thing followed by another momentary thing.
Right.
These types of feelings that just follow one after another in an infinite line.
Kind of like a river.
Mm-hmm. And he also says that consciousness consists of solitary atoms without any content or relation to any bodily behavior. So we're basically, our consciousness is not at all related to our body. It's
Right.
something else entirely.
Yeah, I don't understand the dualism and how those interact and communicate with each other, and what's the relationship between the two. But I think it's unnecessary to have this separation.
I agree. Moving on to Freud,
Yes.
your favorite, and you love talking about Freud.
No, I don't, and I don't. I'm not hostile to it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
you
Then I'll run through this pretty quick.
good.
Because I learned about this in school. So that's fun.
Oh.
So Freud believed that
Super ego, and id.
Yes, we're going to get there.
Dream analysis.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Okay.
So Freud believed that the greater part of our mental life is unconscious. So most of what we do is just unconscious, not actually controlled by us directly, essentially.
Right.
And so with this, he kind of talks about, the things that reveal our true intentions. And with that, Freudian slips, when you go to say one thing, but you accidentally misplace another word in there. He's saying, well, that Freudian slip is really just you revealing your true intentions.
Yes. Right.
He kind of uses the example of like a professor. He says he intends to say, I don't mean to undermine this professor's ideology or whatever, but he actually says, I do mean to undermine his intentions.
Right.
That's really what he's going for there, is that Freudian slip is his actual wish. He also says that dreams can interpret our repressed urges. And so with that, it's not actually so much, looking at a dream, you have this object in your dream, and that's universal for everybody. If you see an umbrella, that means the same thing for everybody in all of their dreams. What Freud kind of actually says is that these objects can only be interpreted through dream analysis. You sit down with this person, what relationship does this object have to you? What made you think about this in your dream? And that can reveal your true intentions as well. He also says neurotic symptoms are automatic reactions to our desires. So, if you have a sudden desire to go running up a mountain or something, that is he kind of goes to this long-winded example of this person who wanted to get rid of this brother, I think it was, and that was his desire to go running. But it's very strange, I think, the way he gets to
sometimes you
these
just want
things.
to run up a mountain.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think he misses. Yeah, I think it's one of those over analysis type problems where, oh, I think it's this and so deep, and that is so deep, and all these other. Anybody who starts talking about hidden motivations and unconscious or subconscious attributes, really all it comes down to is guesswork.
Yeah.
There's their prejudices and how they view others. And I find it all.
Yeah, at some point, it boils down to, well, you just don't have any free will. Actually, it's all just your own desires, your deep hidden desires. And it's like, well, what's the point?
Yeah, and then it's like, how does that really explain what my mind is and what my soul is, and what the essence of me is? If all we're talking about, well, this is really a repressed feeling of something else, and if everything's subconscious, or most of you is subconscious. What am I? And if my actions are mainly motivated by subconscious thoughts, which means I'm not even aware of them, then what am I? And what kind of free will do I have?
Yeah, it's strange. Freud then goes on to basically describe his understanding of the structure of the mind. He believed that there was the id, which is the instinctual drives, hunger and thirst and those sorts of things, and those are ruled by pleasure. There's the ego, which is essentially reason and common sense, and that section of the mind is ruled by reality. And there's the superego, which observes, judges, and punishes the ego, and he kind of relates that to our conscience, and it develops over time. So with this three parts, you have your physical desires, then you have your ego, actually looking at reality, figuring out, how these things actually relate to each other, and the superego, which is essentially your conscious kind of trying to pull you in the right direction.
I don't think this is much different than what other philosophers have said about
and Kenny kind of says
your base feelings, your instincts and emotions, and as opposed to your higher reasoning skills.
And Kenny kind of says it's almost exactly similar to Plato's, I think, tripartite soul.
Yes. Congratulations, Freud. You rediscovered Plato. Eureka! I have discovered it. Wait, I just read Plato. Philosophical psychology in the Tractatus.
Yes.
Wittgenstein. He loves Wittgenstein.
He likes to talk about Wittgenstein a whole lot.
He's got several pages of Wittgenstein stuff here.
Well, after this section of Wittgenstein, there's another section of Wittgenstein.
There's 3 sections of Wittgenstein in this chapter. There's that one, and then there's intentionality with Wittgenstein, and then Wittgenstein's later philosophy of mind.
Yes.
He loves Kant and Wittgenstein. That's one of the main things I've learned about Mr. Kenny. He won't shut up about Kant. And then Kant makes another appearance in the next chapter, but we'll talk about that next episode.
So Wittgenstein believed that a thought is a picture in the mind that logically depicts something. So this is his, picture theory of thought. Yeah. Essentially, every thought relates to...
I just had a thought.
Yes.
Bloop, there's a picture.
Okay.
There's another one.
Well, it's not so much a literal picture, he kind of goes on to say. It's, it's just something that logically, connects. It's not a literal image in our mind. Yes.
Bloop, I had another one.
So he kind of follows Freud a little bit here. He says, the propositions we say or believe are operations of largely unconscious operations. But it's not so much that we're just driven by these unconscious desires, but more so that when we go to say something... we don't actually have to think out what it is that we need to say. We just say it, and it's that unconscious operation. We just...
I always have to think of what I'm going to say.
Well, yeah, it's not so much that you just, start speaking, but, where's the... the
as far as getting the words,
yes,
I guess.
Where's the space where you actually, where do I actually... I want to say this word. It's that whole thing, where does it end? I want to move my finger versus actually moving your finger,
There's a lot of truth.
I think so, yes.
It's not as clear to me about the same, that it's the same as moving a finger, because maybe it's just unique to me, but there's a lot of times I stop and I stutter because I'm trying to get the right word or exactly how I'm going to say it, especially if I'm thinking deep thoughts and trying to express
you're
them.
always thinking deep thoughts, I know.
That's true. That is true.
I did not mean that.
I don't often think not deep thoughts. I mean, deep thoughts is I define them.
Yes. Give me an example of a deep thought you've thought recently.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know if you could say they're deep thoughts, but like even just talking about the categories of different things, like if you're going to order like chicken rings from White Castle.
The one on Big Bend?
No, not the Knights at White Castle.
That's a great song.
If anybody actually listens to this, you have to Google KC95 Knights at White Castle.
I'll put it in the description of this episode. I'll put a link.
If you do not laugh until you can't breathe, you are not human.
50 White Castles and a Coke.
With cheese.
That'd be $1.09.
That'd be $1.09.
Nobody has any clue what we're talking about.
They will. They will thank us for it.
Yeah,
we will get comments on that one. If anybody actually plays that thing.
It's amazing.
Based upon a Moody Blues song.
Anyway, what were we even talking about?
I was going to talk about my brilliant thought about the categories of food.
Oh, yes.
That's right.
That's
that moment has passed.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
So Wittgenstein then goes on.
But do you find yourself thinking deep thoughts or thoughts about things in odd times?
Yeah, I do.
All right, good. Because I think I don't know if I think about stuff more than other people think about them.
Yeah.
Or if I just share that more.
Yeah. Because that's something I've thought about. How often do people actually think about the things that I think about? Because I'll have no way of ever knowing unless they,
tell you,
vocalize everything that they're thinking about. And it's like, well,
right.
How much of that do we all have in common?
I wonder, like super geniuses, if they.
I'm not trying to say that I'm like a super genius or anything. That kind of sounded.
Well, but you're smarter than most, there are people that are smarter than me,
mm-hmm.
and I wonder if their brains work faster. I think things faster than some people at a faster rate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of like a runner, a good fast runner is going to have a faster cadence with a longer stride. And I think there's some of that with people that are smarter than others.
Mm-hmm.
But, you could still trip and you could still go down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that people that are smarter have higher moral value or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly don't.
Yeah.
But I wonder what other people think about.
Yeah.
It'd
be interesting to just be able to
tap in and listen to it. Yeah, that would be interesting. Like God must be able to. You got to figure.
Yeah.
At least I assume he does.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think God knows your thoughts?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I guess it kind of goes.
How?
Well, I don't know how. It's God. I don't know.
I'm asking.
It kind of goes back to that whole moral thing about the motives. If why would it be morally wrong if nobody else knew about it besides you? Because it has to have an impact on somebody, I would say. And I guess
for it to be morally right or wrong.
Well, no, not exactly. I guess. I don't know, actually. You stumped me with that one.
It wasn't that hard of a question. Whether somebody else has to know what your thinking is, or what your desires are, or your motive is.
Mm-hmm.
You think the fact that no one else knows has anything to do with whether or not what you did was right?
No, I would still think that would still be morally wrong, because you still did the action, and if you did the action, no matter how aware other people are, if you thought the thought and it was not a good thought to think, if nobody else even knows about that, that's still a wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because otherwise you end up having a morality based upon the availability of information of others, and or the consequence of it, which is then
utilitarian.
We'll talk about it in the next chapter, I guess.
Yes.
But as far as your mind and what you perceive, or what it is that your mind is in your soul, is an interesting topic as far as where does your body end and your mind begin, and where does your mind in relation to a soul, and does it exist after you die, and how do you define what that thing is that is your consciousness?
Yeah. It's a very tricky question.
I'm asking you. What
You're asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, I would kind of say that the mind and the soul would almost be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when we're looking at, because all these things, what makes us different from animals and stuff, and I think that's, kind of the degrees of the soul, I guess. Humans have the top of the hierarchy of the soul, and it kind of leads back into those other things that just make us different from animals is, that ability to actually, exist, kind of like what you said, the past, present, and future, to look back on our own actions. We're not just here in the moment, we're actually looking ahead and looking behind, kind of that ability to reason. I think that also kind of equates with the soul, because I don't think there's any other animals that really have that, like we were talking about.
Right. I wonder if it's a benefit to have a mind and free will and that consciousness, mind, soul, or if it's more of a burden.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because, dogs live a little life and then they die.
Yeah.
Do you think dogs have souls?
I would say so.
Really?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Because I don't like the alternative. Because I just don't think it's not the same as a human soul, of course.
What happens when they die? They go to little doggy
I don't know.
heaven?
I've never died.
Well, you're just not going to even speculate?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know, because we actually had our 8th grade teacher talk to us about this back in grade school, because the Catholic Church teaches that no animals go to heaven. And so us in 8th grade were pretty distraught by that, because we wanted our dogs to go to heaven. And our 8th grade teacher, who actually was not a Catholic, she said, well, I don't think that God would put something on earth that makes us very, very happy and then not have us be able to access that in heaven.
Huh. So I guess I'll have an unlimited supply of Quick Trip bratwurst.
Do Quick Trip bratwursts have souls?
Well, according to your 8th grade teacher, yes.
I guess
because they bring an unlimited amount of pleasure and happiness to me.
Well, the Catholic Church also teaches that animals do have souls, and plants. They're just not that same level of soul.
Yeah.
But they just don't go to heaven. Humans are the only thing that go to heaven.
I guess the way I'm trying to remember my theology, I guess the definition of heaven, the Catholic Church, is really a reunion
with God.
With God, and so it kind of makes a certain amount of logical sense that would be reserved for humans who are created in the image of God, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know where I come down on that.
Yeah.
I think I tend to think the same way you do. Is I don't like to contemplate the alternative, which is they just die.
Yeah.
That seems not right.
So I think that even though they do live in the moment, I think they do still have like a personality. And,
Well,
I
sure
don't
they
think
have a personality.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think, that's something that just is gone forever.
Yeah. I think there are some dogs that are morally better than a lot of humans.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. I know we have.
But I don't think any bad dogs go to hell.
Because I think bad dogs are more victims of circumstance than people ever are.
Right. And so if they don't get punished for their behavior, are they even morally responsible for them? Were they caused to be sweet and kind to us, and therefore are not responsible for their goodness any more than they're responsible for their badness?
I don't know. That's a tricky question.
Yeah, I think I've just convinced myself they just die.
Oh,
they just get extinguished like a little putting on a flame.
Oh, God. That's really sad.
Yeah. God is a judgmental entity.
Profound.
Don't you think so? People
Yes.
forget that.
Yes, I agree with that.
And I think God's like, yeah, they're all good and all that, but they had their little life and it's over. Don't you think?
I don't know.
I think God's just like, it's a dog.
I don't know. I hope not.
I was listening to the radio a couple months ago, and there's a gal who's was a radio, like a morning show, so they're talk radio, and the gal was like, oh, my dog's sick, and I have to take him to the vet when I get done from work today. I'm really worried because this is our third dog, and it's a $500 dog. Did I tell you the story?
I don't think so.
And the other people on the other DJs or radio personalities are like, what do you mean $500? What does that mean, $500? Well, it was a rescue dog, and my husband said we're only going to rescue this dog, if it doesn't cost us a whole lot of money, because we'll provide a home for it. But if there's a big vet bill, then the dog's just going to die peacefully because it's a $500 limit dog. So any vet bill that would be over $500 means they put the dog down.
Hmm.
And it sounds cruel, but in the sense it's very utilitarian.
Yes.
And maybe God just has that kind of $500 dog limit. Maybe just like, yeah, they get to live and then they die. I mean, how is it different from the plants or horses or beetles or mice? Are all these things going to live in heaven? Maybe they're all the God's version of a $500 dog.
It's a good question.
All right.
Maybe
But if they
heaven
have
is just overrun with beetles. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think beetles have a mind
Yeah.
or a soul. And you can kind of go through, the evolution or developmental stages, and there's some that are closer to us,
Yeah.
dogs or dolphins or pigs even.
Monkeys.
But yeah, so some of the monkeys.
Yeah, some of the monkeys.
Some of the monkeys.
Yeah, exactly.
Do they have souls?
Yeah, I don't know.
Mind? Maybe.
Maybe.
Can they have a mind without a soul? But you think it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have an answer.
I don't think we do either. Moving on to intentionality.
For Wittgenstein, and then some other people.
Well, not so much even Wittgenstein. Breaks from
Oh.
Wittgenstein after the first
All
paragraph.
right, very good.
So we start off with this guy, Brentano. And Brentano says, basically here, I'm going to read this section. Every psychical phenomenon is characterized by what the medieval scholars called the intentional or mental existence of an object, and what we, not quite unambiguously, would call relation to a content, object directedness, or immanent objectivity. Object here does not mean reality. Each such phenomenon contains in itself something as an object, though not each in the same manner. In imagination, something is imagined. In judgment, something is accepted or rejected. In love, something is loved. In hatred, something is hated. In desire, something is desired, and so forth. This intentional existence is a property only of psychical phenomena. No physical phenomenon displays anything similar. And so we can define psychical phenomena by saying that they are those phenomena that contain an object intentionally. So what he's kind of saying here...
let's summarize that because that's a lot of words.
That was a lot of words. So what he's saying here essentially is the difference between, our thoughts and our actions essentially. Or not our thoughts and our actions. How do I put this?
I'm not sure where you're going with that.
I don't know where I'm going with this. But essentially there's two different types of mental actions.
Well, there's the perception of the item and the item, I guess.
Yes.
Isn't that part of what he's talking about?
That's part of what he's talking about. And so what we see here with these things that he's kind of talking about, these...
the next line in Kenny's book is, this famous passage is not altogether clear, so don't feel bad.
Yes.
Because I'm not quite sure what this guy was saying.
I knew what he was saying when I wrote my notes down, and now I have forgotten, which is
have
unfortunate. I should have taken better notes. I should have. So I think what he's saying here is that, there's these certain types of actions in our mind, in which, things like to love something, there's an object there. Something is loved.
Yeah, you have to have the thing to love in order to love.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Isn't that what he's saying?
Yes, and there's a difference between actually just imagining something. And, those imaginations aren't actually, this is where he's going with this, aren't actually, moral or immoral. Because I can just imagine something, but that doesn't make a difference. But if I hate something, something is being hated. If I love something, something is being loved. And that's a moral or an immoral action. Yeah. Because that actually has... Yes.
Good
there
job.
we go. Got there in the end.
Yes.
That's where I was going with that.
There you go. So let's move on to the next guy.
Yes.
Husserl.
So Husserl believes that consciousness consists of intentional experiences or acts. Intentionality is what an act is about. So basically, the end goal of your action, what it actually surrounds, the circumstances. And you believe that acts have matter and quality. And so with this is what he's kind of saying here is, take, for example, the two different things, the two different actions of seeing Rome and imagining Rome. They both have the same, content. They both have the same matter. It's both Rome, but the difference is they have a different quality. One, you're actually physically seeing it yourself. The other, you're just imagining it. And those are two different actions. So it's kind of a similar thing to what I believe Brentano is saying here. It's one thing for me to imagine this action, and it's another thing for me to actually perform this action,
Yeah, I guess it's a somewhat interesting distinction in the mind, as opposed, you're imagining it as opposed to experiencing it, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we move on to Russell here. I believe, Bertrand Russell.
Uh-huh.
He kind of says, I'm going to read this section here as
Oh,
well.
are you? Oh,
Yes,
good.
I am going
Thank
to read
you.
this. Yeah,
Read
you're
the
welcome.
whole thing.
He says, a mental occurrence of any kind, sensation, image, belief, or emotion, may be a cause of a series of actions continuing, unless interrupted, until some more or less definite state of affairs is realized. Such a series of actions we call a behavior cycle. The property of causing such a cycle of occurrences is called discomfort. The cycle ends in a condition of quiescence, maybe, or of such action as tends to preserve the status quo. The state of affairs in which this condition of quiescence is achieved is called the purpose of the cycle. And the initial mental occurrence involving discomfort is called a desire for the state of affairs that brings quiescence. A desire is called conscious when it is accompanied by a true belief as to the state of affairs that will bring quiescence. Otherwise, it is called unconscious. So basically what he's saying here is this difference between how we actually perform our actions. It all starts from this root desire, and then we move on to actually trying to achieve this end of the state of affairs. Either we maintain things as they are, or we achieve our end goal here with this conscious and unconscious. When our beliefs or our actions are conscious, when we really do want to achieve that end goal. They're unconscious if we're just kind of moving through the motions, not quite sure the consequences there.
Right.
Yes. Got there in the end.
No, you did.
Yes.
Good job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No, it's a interesting or important distinction
Mm-hmm.
of what your consciousness is relative to your actions.
Mm-hmm.
You're really thinking about walking down the street as opposed to, okay, I have to go to the store.
Mm-hmm.
Like what am I? And then you walk there. As far as your voluntariness of the action and your consciousness of it in the mind.
Yeah, it's kind of that similar thing of where do I begin to move my finger, that sort of thing.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, that's deep.
Moving on to Wittgenstein's later philosophy of mind. So Wittgenstein, in his later years, believed that intentionality is all important. So at this point in his life, he's kind of rejected some of his past philosophies and moved on to different sections here. And so intentionality is very much the important thing. So here's this little quote here. He says, "Self is a piece of philosopher's nonsense produced by misunderstanding of the reflexive pronoun." So what he's kind of saying here is he's very much going against, that dualism. We don't have this separate self that is separate from the body. It's just you're not understanding the use of the word I when we're talking about things. This isn't referring to this separate thing that is opposite my body. We don't need this dualism. The mind and the soul are kind of just, or not the mind and the soul, the body and the soul are just kind of the same almost. It is just me.
It's one of the,
it's one.
the same.
Yes.
They're different qualities.
Different
but
qualities.
They're the same being.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So he says that my body isn't the body that I have, but just the body that I am, kind of that sort of thing. I'm not possessing.
I am who am,
yes,
as God would say.
Yes, as God would say. Famous quote from God. Glad you quoted him there. And so he also kind of says, to go along with that, is that this mind isn't this imaginary mechanism. There's not this, series of cogs, essentially, that is our mind, that is separate from our body. It's not this separate thing that controls us. He also says that thought and understanding are not processes, but states. We don't actually have to, go through these steps of thinking something. We kind of just do. We don't have to go through the steps of actually, understanding something. Although in some cases we do have to find a way to get to that understanding. But once we get there, it's not this lengthy process. It is just a state. Either I understand it or I don't.
All right. Good explanation.
Yes, thank you.
And we're going back to Aristotle when we get down to the base of it. I don't know if you're there, but very similar to they have a quote from Aristotle at the end of the chapter. To say that the soul gets angry is as if one were to say that the soul weaves or builds a house. Probably it is better not to say that the soul pities or learns or thinks, but that the human being does those things with its soul.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty much what Wittgenstein is saying.
Yeah, Wittgenstein, he kind of says, it's really kind of stupid to think of the soul as like a little homunculus, a little miniature version of yourself, like inside of you that's kind of puppeting your actions. That's just ridiculous. It's not this separate thing. You just are who you are, and that includes your body and your soul. Yeah. They're not two separate things.
Agreed. I think I agree with that.
Yes, I do agree with that. Because it's kind of what you were saying earlier, how do we know how the soul actually affects the body if we believe that they're two separate things?
Yeah. Where does it begin and where does it end? And then you think about all the physical characteristics that affect your mind and I think soul. I mean, I think people in a very real way, have damaged souls because what's happened to their bodies.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't mean like in a moral damage. I think that like when you talk about like a diminished responsibility, if you've been abused as a child, I think it damages you in such a way as to affect your ability to make some moral distinctions later, almost.
That's kind of what he says. He puts that out there, is that, the choices that you do make are determined by the choices that you can make. At some point, there's sometimes there's a limit on what you can even do. True.
That is true. Yeah. Because, you have physical limitations that don't allow you to. It's kind of like when Bilbo was in the middle of the Battle of Five Armies or whatever.
Yes.
And he's this little hobbit with his little tiny sword. Mm-hmm. What can he really do to affect the outcome?
Yes.
He can only do what he could do.
I'm very confused as to what point you're actually pointing to there. Like, what point in time? Is that like a thing?
Well, it wasn't.
In the book, he gets knocked unconscious before the battle even starts.
Oh.
Or, well, no. I guess after the battle begins, like he fights for a little bit and then is knocked unconscious while he's invisible. And wakes up after it's over.
But he's there, like in the battle.
Yes.
But he's a little hobbit, and not a warlike hobbit at that.
Yes.
And so he's limited in what he could actually accomplish in that role.
Yes.
That's all I meant.
Okay.
I'm just making a very effective
Tolkien
reference.
Yes, that's a good Tolkien reference. Yes.
Because
wasn't forced at all.
No, I didn't mean it to be forced because your physical limitations affect your options for moral behavior. At some point, when you're trying to do good in the world, you're limited to your ability to do the good. You can try.
Actually, there's a Gandalf quote about that. I'm going to misquote it here because I don't know the exact.
Don't misquote Gandalf.
I don't know.
He'll come back as the Pink Prince or something. He was Gandalf the Gray, and now he's Gandalf the White. Maybe he'll come back and punish you as Gandalf the Pink or something.
Okay.
Go ahead.
He says, something along the lines of, I have found that it's not the actions, the extraordinary deeds of great heroes that truly change the world. It's the everyday good deeds of small people like you.
True, as they accumulate.
Yes,
I agree with that. 100,000%.
And that's not the direct words, don't quote me on that. But
no, but I remember that scene.
Yes, that's in the Hobbit movies.
Yes, it's in the Hobbit movie.
The quote is from the Lord of the Rings, I think.
Is that real?
Yes, there's a lot of things that are...
A lot of liberties they take.
Well, the Hobbit movies, yeah. Well,
they're very good. The best of those movies.
They are nowhere close to being as good as the Lord of the Rings. But
I will say this. I think the story might be better for Lord of the Rings.
Well, yes.
If they had a different actor for Frodo.
There we go.
And they needed an editor to cut out some excessive scenes.
I wish the Lord of the Rings would have been longer. Personally, because they cut out a lot of stuff from the books.
Well, no, I agree, but some of it was drawn out.
Okay.
Some of what they have in there, like the climbing up of the volcano and stuff.
It's not that long.
It is horribly
not that
long.
You just get bored by the end of the movie. If we split up our watching into two parts, you would be perfectly fine with the length of the...
No, I can watch Lawrence of Arabia, which has, I don't know how many scenes with no dialogue at all. And it's just a beautiful movie. And it tells a story visually. I can watch long movies that are well made with good actors. You have to admit, what is his name?
Elijah Wood.
He's horrible.
No.
You don't really think so? You think he was good?
I think he does a good job.
Oh my God. Really?
Yes.
I find that impossible to believe. Impossible. I don't believe you that you think he did a good job.
Well, what I was saying is, I think The Lord of the Rings should have been longer. But the Hobbit movies, their original plan, the reason why it's so weird and misconnected at some points is because it was originally supposed to be two movies.
Which one?
The Hobbit series. All three of them. There's three of them.
There was supposed to be just two.
Yes, it's supposed to be just two originally, and then they ran out of time kind of to make the end of the second one. They didn't work because they switched directors after basically midway through the production process.
I didn't know that.
It was originally Guillermo del Toro.
Huh.
And so then he stepped down with all this kind of unfinished stuff, and it was very different from the story that Peter Jackson would have told. So when he stepped in, a whole bunch of stuff had to be changed, and it just became this whole big mess. Because
the first one ends just kind of suddenly, doesn't it?
Well, it ends halfway through the book.
Yeah.
It ends when they're rescued by the eagles from the Misty Mountains,
Yeah,
and then
so
that's
there's
it.
a bit different problem I have with the whole storyline.
Yeah, so the original first movie was supposed to end with them escaping from Mirkwood.
They should have
Okay.
brought in the Air Force
Oh,
a lot earlier in every one of these battles, and it drives me crazy that all of a sudden the Eagles come to the rescue at the very end after thousands of people have to die.
They don't have any obligation to these people. They're just eagles.
Then why'd you show up at all?
Oh, because they felt bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, in the Hobbit, they owed Gandalf a favor.
Yeah, they should have gotten Kim. He should have called in the favor a lot earlier. And why didn't he just take the Eagles to that Misty Mountains or whatever that is?
In Lord of the Rings of the Hobbit.
With the one with the dragon, right? They went through this whole long journey.
Okay.
Why didn't you just call up the Eagles and say, hey, give us a lift?
Well, it was a stealth thing. They're going to sneak into the
How
mountain.
could it be any... How can taking the Eagles not be stealth? They can fly at night.
They're giant eagles.
They could fly at night. No one would ever... Or above the clouds.
Okay.
No one would ever know. It'd be much more stealthy than traipsing through the woods and stuff.
The explanation for the Hobbit books.
They couldn't have been tracked down by that evil
or the Hobbit book
dude and those wolf dog things they wrote on.
The wargs.
Yeah. They would never be able to smell them.
Okay. The explanation kind of for the book is that, the book wasn't entirely supposed to be this grand epic sort of thing. It was a children's story. It was meant to draw on kind of like the fairy tale sort of aspects of everything. The heroes have to go through these trials and whatever to get there.
Right.
The Lord of the Rings is a different story, of course, but that's kind of.
Well, I think they should not have had the Eagles at all.
Really?
Yeah, because they should have figured out a different way to end those. It's just like that guy that does those YouTube videos where he's like, well, how do they get out of that? Oh, it's barely an inconvenience, and it's like, oh, the Eagles show up all of a sudden, and it's barely an inconvenience. They just get rescued all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's kind of the same thing for the Ents then. They had to be convinced to actually care about things.
Well, I think that was better.
Yes.
Because you meet the Ents, you can see that they are so old that they can't worry about every battle and dispute that goes on in the world.
Well, it's the same thing with the Eagles.
Well, they don't develop it though. Well, all of a sudden, they just show up because some moth got whispered to.
You were complaining about that they need to be shorter. They need to be cut more.
But the Ents, that story is told where that either like, nope, we're not going to help you out, and then he's going to deliver him, and then he realizes, oh my God, they just butchered all my friends. They murdered all these trees, and then they got pissed, and then they attacked him.
Yes.
They had nothing to do with helping anybody out. They just wanted to murder that Sauron guy and his little worm.
Well, the thing with the Lord of the Rings and everything, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background that's not actually told in the stories.
Well, do they ever tell the eagle story?
I don't.
In any of the books?
I'm sure.
All of a sudden, the eagles just fly in, swoop in, and rescue
sure it is
everybody.
Explained.
Well, you read them.
Well, I don't remember every detail in those books.
Because
people are like, well, what about, the Misty Mountain? Where was that during, the Lord of the Rings? Where are those guys? And there were battles happening there too. It's just not explained in the story because it doesn't affect the main character.
I just feel like the Eagles were cheap.
Okay.
It was just a cheap way out.
I think you should go tell J.R.R. Tolkien, who died in 1973. You should go tell him I think that was a cheap move.
It was a cheap move. I think everybody agrees that the Eagles are a cheap move.
Oh, that was a cheap move. You're a cheap move. All right. Well, this has been episode 37 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
You can still follow us on Twitter, capital U, lowercase LMTD, opinions with a capital O. That was way too much Lord of the Rings talk. I still disagree.
Is that a thing? Can there be too much Lord of the Rings talk?
No, there can't. No. Next episode is just Lord of the Rings.